Hi you guys, it's your boy Davion. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're here to talk about the word faggot versus the word bitch, whore, fat, cunt, and everything else in the book. If you guys are interested, then stay tuned. So a friend of mine was on another YouTuber's page, and there was a conversation going on about how the LGBT community gets upset when people use the word sissy, punk, faggot, etc. But the LGBT community feel like they can say anything they want to say. They can call you all type of niggas and bitches and hoes, etc. And I guess some people feel like this is a hypocrisy on behalf of the LGBT community. And at first glance, it does look that way. But this is one of those issues that requires a full context. And it is a layered issue. It's not as black and white as it really sounds. So I'm hoping that we can have some conversation amongst each other about this, because I'm really interested to see what you guys really think about this and if it even makes sense to you guys. So obviously we know that the LGBT community is equivalent to the beehive. The LGBT community is a really powerful community. There's a certain social power that homosexuals have over the social space at this point, especially as it relates to society, as it relates to corporations. When the LGBT community is upset about something, feels discriminated against, the LGBT community can move mountains. That's the power that has come as a result of being able to come together on a united front. Something that I'm still looking for the African American community to come together on. I would love for us as black people, despite what we believe, despite our racial differences, our cultural differences, our religious differences, for us to be able to galvanize together when it comes to discrimination and set all the other shit aside and fight for a common cause. Because a lot of people don't understand how the LGBT community has come into the power that they've come into, and still have a lot more power to acquire. And there's just a simple reality. We take a united front on things that directly impact LGBT reality and the LGBT community as a whole. For my black people who are looking to see how we as a black community can come into power, it's just all about being able to come together. Now, when it comes to the issue of vocabulary and all of that stuff, there's still a lot of prejudice, homophobic people in the world, period. Both men and women. There are homophobic men, homophobic women of all nationalities who do not like homosexuals, who still reject homosexuality, who still bully and harass people based simply upon their sexuality for no other purpose. Not the merit of their character, not because of how they live and the choices they make, simply because of their orientation or their gender identity and or gender expression warrants discrimination. Discrimination that leads to brutal beating, and that sometimes lead to murder. When we see heterosexual people using words like sissy and punk in a time that is still thick in terms of discrimination, it's still thick in terms of prejudice, it's still thick with dogmatic, religious, bigoted, inspired philosophies and beliefs about LGBT persons, we have not entered socially, in terms of our social collective consciousness, into a space where heterosexual people can use the word sissy, punk, faggot without it possibly influencing some homophobe to hear that word, to think about the gay people in their own minds and have that conjure up feelings of hate, conjuring up feelings of violence, riling people up to make them tap into parts of their consciousness that can actually lead them to go out and to hurt LGBT persons. All last year, there was nothing but hate crimes being committed. Trans women being chased down the street with guns shooting after her. Gay men being found chopped up and thrown out in the desert in Arizona. Another gay man ended up shot and killed in his apartment. I mean, there was so many crimes. Even there was an incident a few months ago last year where a lesbian couple was murdered along with their children. I think a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, along with both same gender loving parents, were murdered in their apartments. Murdered. So this still is a sore spot for the LGBT community and people who don't have a discretion when it comes to the LGBT community don't find any wrong in continuing to employ violent vocabulary against a community who is still facing persecution, still facing judgment. And it's really strange to me because this issue isn't just an LGBT related issue. When you support homophobia, you also set homosexuals up to live in ways that ultimately also interfere in the lives of heterosexuals. Look at all of these DL cases. We have people like Markeith Rivers, who's known as the down low detective, who black women use to help to see if their boyfriends or husbands is on the down low. And they pay this guy. He goes and tries to get close to these men, and then he records himself fucking these men, them giving him head, or in some adulterous homosexual act with him. And then he publicizes the findings. And there's a context to the DL community that oftentimes does not get addressed by the heterosexual community. The homophobia in the country is what motivates people to live on the down low. You intimidate people out of embracing themselves when you continue to convict them and bombard them with religious ideas or with social ideas about don't be no sissy, don't be no punk, don't do that gay shit, nigga, you gay, you an abomination. What you do is you set people up to try to be somebody who they not. And then they go out and marry innocent men and innocent women of the opposite sex, engage in a romantic relationship and a sexual relationship with them, while all the time not genuinely being in love with that person, and or while having a same-sex affair. And then when that becomes public news, the issue becomes, oh, these down low niggas, these down low females, when it's like, no, they're not on the down low because it has anything to do with the LGBT community. They're on the down low because they too afraid to be themselves, because some of y'all make them afraid to be who they are. The heterosexual community makes them afraid to be who they are. Threaten them with violence, threaten them with hate speeches, threaten them with harassment, reject them and other them and outcast them. There's a lot that people have to give up and have to face in a homophobic nation in terms of embracing their own truth. So it's not a 1, 2, 3 issue. So as long as gay people are continuing to die, and this is still something that's very prevalent in the community, the suicide rate is high amongst LGBT persons. I can't tell you the countless amount of young people, I'm talking about high schoolers and middle schoolers and elementary students, who have taken their own lives because they could not reconcile their sexuality. Their mothers and fathers finding them hung in the closet of their bedroom, or finding them strangled or hung in the bathroom stall at school, or finding them overdosed on the kitchen floor and leaving behind a suicide note stating how they were tired of the harassment at school. They were tired of kids bullying them and picking on them for being gay. The war has been conquered in a sense politically. You know, yes, we have the right to marry. Yes, we have certain rights to protect ourselves as a community and as people, but that has not bled out into the social spaces that gay people dwell within. What has happened at the top of the pyramid has not bled down into the hood. It has not bled down into urban communities. It has not bled down into conservative spaces. And so that hate and that homophobia is still very real. So when I said in my previous video that faggot, punk, freak is the last words that a lot of LGBT persons have heard before a gun was put to their head, that is real shit. And you can go and check that out and check out the statistics and the numbers for yourself. This is not reading rainbow. You do not have to take my word for anything. Now that we understand the context of what's so upsetting and what's so inappropriate about marginalized and use marginalizing vocabulary and use violent vocabulary against the people who are still being targeted, gay people using the term bitch, fat, whore, etc., this is all language that everybody uses against one another. Even though the gays will use bitch, we use the word bitch loosely, the same way that women do. Women use it as a term of endearment, and women also use it as an insult toward other women, toward gay men, and sometimes toward heterosexual men too. But at the same time, you never find the LGBT community at war with people for no reason. You only find gay people going after motherfuckers who are coming after them. Unlike heterosexual people, gay people don't sit around and just discriminate against heterosexuals. Gay people don't sit around and just discriminate against women. Gay people don't sit around and just discriminate against men. The heterosexual community and a large number of the heterosexual community, both men and women, just sit around and hate and reject homosexuals just because. Just because. And so this is where heterosexual people just have to realize their privilege. When you have a privilege over people, there's a certain responsibility and maturity that you have to walk in, even when you are upset with the lower class. And in comparison to heterosexuality, homosexuals are still a lower class beneath heterosexual people. That's still the social understanding for the most part. Yeah, we're breaking ground and breaking down doors, but yet that is still the social understanding that first is heterosexual, then everything else beneath that. So privileged people have to realize that they're privileged. And when the term faggot is used, it's those who have home-based privileges who can use the term faggot. Like, as a homosexual myself, I can use those terms. I can use fag. I can use punk. I can use sissy. Because it doesn't mean the same thing even when it's coming from me, and I mean it because I don't have the privilege to really give life to that word. You as a privileged person, when you use certain vocabulary and take certain actions, you have the resources, you have the social power to put behind what you say, especially toward another class of people. There's a reason why black people are still fighting against the word nigga. Yeah, we can use the word nigga. Niggas can use the word niggas on niggas. Everybody else, we ain't in a place where y'all can still say that because niggas still losing their life, and niggas is still the last word that some niggas hear before an outsider takes their life. Nigga is the same word that maybe Trayvon Martin heard before his life was taken, before Sandra Bland's life was taken, and the countless others. Now, when gay people fuck up, like anybody else, we are to be held to the cross. And when it's time for battle, it's time for motherfucking battle. And you can go to war with gay people. But in terms of understanding why the gay community has a heightened sensitivity toward the term faggot, it's because of the cultural context of those words. It's because of the privileged people who use those words. Still the present day current climate and what it means to be a LGBT identifying persons in what is still a homophobic nation. That is where the upset comes from. Know what's disrespectful and what's inappropriate and what's just crossing the line. Just like the word cunt is a very, very offensive word to a lot of women, especially white women. They are more bent out of shape over cunt than they are even bitch. That is equivalent to being called a nigga for white women as cunt, or being called a faggot. There's a way to fight that still can get your point across without it being completely guttural and vicious in nature. And then there's just some styles of fighting that are just vicious and vile and just filthy and disgusting. And that's where people just have to discern for themselves the difference in fighting styles. It's degrees of verbal sparring. And all bad language is essentially bad language. But there are levels to this shit. And just to speak to why the word faggot, punk, and sissy are disrespectful and still inappropriate language to use toward LGBT persons, this is the reason why. Because we still live in a culture that supports the killing and the hurt of LGBT persons. There is a percentage of the black community who openly hates LGBT persons. There's a large bulk of the religious community who has a prejudice and a discrimination against LGBT persons. There are still heavy institutions and social construct that bring death and destruction to people who are of these communities. I just wanted to speak to that and give some context to the argument. You guys can tell me what you guys think and feel. You guys can also share this video. Get the opinions of Twitter and Facebook and your friends and your family. And you guys tell me what you guys think. Share, subscribe, comment, and rate. Hit that notification button. And thank you guys for supporting. And I will check you guys later.